Hey guys, Furum here, and today I'm going to be playing on the brand new Auckland Track that has come to Asphalt 9 in the Heatwave season update. Check out my previous two videos if you would like to see the stats of all the new cars in the update as well as the other changes and additions. If you would like to play these tracks for yourself, go to the new Heatwave season, which is in Chapter 2, and once you get to the 4th race in the season, you'll be able to play the first Auckland variant, which is called Auckland Track. It is a 90-second track, but it will probably be a bit longer for me as I have to drive it in the BMW Z4. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, it allows us to see the track better. We're not just flying through it like we will later in the video with some faster cars. And this right here was the very first race that I have ever played on this track. I've not seen anybody else play it either, so this is my first time seeing the track, aside from those two screenshots that Gameloft posted in the patch notes. One of the first things I realized was that this was decidedly not a top speed oriented track, which is somewhat of a letdown since we really haven't had one of those in a while. New York is really the closest thing we've gotten to it, and I guess Nevada a little bit too with that rough patch that was fixed, but overall, no, just really good top speed track. This unfortunately is not so, at least for most of the variants that I played today. Some are straighter than others, but in so much of the track, there are these really tight turns, just one after another. Now, there are some straight sections like right here, but they don't last for very long and they just go into the twisty parts again. And now we come to the end of the first lap of Auckland Track. One thing that struck me as very weird is I was able to finish the first lap of this race in under a minute in the worst car in the game, which the BMW Z4 is generally considered to be nowadays. This doesn't really make a lot of sense since Gameloft called it a 90-second track, but I think this is probably just because all of the tracks that have laps pretty much are these 90-second tracks, with the exception of like that one on Caribbean, which is kind of a weird outlier, but I feel like this one should have been called a 60-second track because that would have made a lot more sense. Another thing you will note about this track is that it is set in the nighttime. However, the track itself is pretty well lit up. There are tons of light all over the place, so the track itself is not dark as it is on Shanghai or Rome. Personally, I really enjoy the overall atmosphere of this track. It really feels like you're driving on a kind of racetrack, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's patterned after real-world racetracks, is what Gameloft says, and I can certainly see that. So we've come to the end of Auckland Straight, and now we're going to be moving on to one of these shorter tracks, a 30-second one called Straight Sprint. In total, there are going to be 4 different variants of Auckland in this video, and I'm going to be playing on each of them with a different car. This one right here is the Porsche 911 Targa. I thought it would be fun to try out a car which is notoriously bad at drifting and see how it does on a track where that should be quite important. Weird story time here. So my 911 Targa is golden maxed, but I don't actually remember ever golden maxing it, and I have no idea how I actually got it golden maxed. So if anybody has any idea about that, please let me know. Either I've just gone bonkers or something weird has happened to my account, because it's been like that for a while, and ever since I first saw it, I've legitimately not known how this car was golden in my garage. Very weird. It did seem to do pretty well in this track though, even with that bad drifting. And now we're moving on to another 90-second track called Industrial Run. This time I'm going to be playing in a more agile car, the BMW i8. Now when I saw all of those goals, I decided that I was going to try to get them all in one run with this car. I think there were 10 nitro bottles, 3 360s in one go, and then 3 barrel rolls. So that is why you might see me do some kind of weird stuff throughout this race, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because we might get to see other routes than I think people would normally take on the track. One thing that Gameloft said in the patch notes is that there were no obstacles on this track. I'm thinking that probably means like there aren't any cars on the road or anything like that, so as long as you stay on the road, there's not really going to be anything in your way. There also are minimal ramps on this track. It is probably one of the tracks in Asphalt 9 with the lowest number of ramps, which makes sense with it being a racetrack. I mean, you normally don't find ramps on racetracks, not that you find ramps normally anyway, but in any case, Azure Coast was at least somewhat patterned after a racetrack, I believe, and that one didn't have any ramps, so yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised if this one didn't have any either. But I'm glad it does, because it makes sections like that right there honestly kind of fun to go through. Now, I'm sure y'all are wondering, How do I actually feel about this track? I have seen a lot of negativity towards it because it is kind of narrow at parts and it's not top speed oriented at all, and it's got all these tight turns and stuff. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't consider it to be the best track, but I do think it will be an interesting challenge to see what's the fastest way on all the variants, because they are quite different. And this last one is going to be on the circuit, which is one of the longest tracks. It is a 120-second track, and this time I'm going to be taking out the Corvette Grand Sport, which is a car that should be able to get through the track without much of a problem at all. I think one issue that people have with this track, with it being so twisty and everything, is that it will just probably increase the amount of Huracan and Corvette spam in multiplayer, as these cars will likely be able to get through it easier and not lose as much speed around the corners and stuff. Now, it remains to be seen which kinds of cars are actually fastest here. That is what I am really curious about. I am thinking it's definitely going to be the more agile cars, and I would say especially cars that have tight drifting radii as well as very good acceleration. Now comes one of the coolest parts. You can actually go up on the wall up here. I didn't too much, I did a little bit, but you can if you want to. Kind of reminds me of Sector 8 a little bit. Overall, I guess I have kind of mixed feelings about this track. Hitting the walls all over the place wasn't especially fun, but I do think that as we play it more and it becomes more optimized, we'll learn better routes and everything like that, and I don't think it will cause that much of a problem in events. I do think the biggest issues will be in multiplayer, because as many people have pointed out, it is a rather narrow track in parts. We might have some of these same kinds of situations as we have on some of those new Rome variants, where the track's just so tight at some places it's hard to get past people and a lot of knockdowns happen. That's honestly what I am most worried about with this track. But I do think, as with all tracks in the past, people will find some optimized routes, and I don't think that we will be left in the dark for too long as what's the best cars to use, what are the best routes to use, and things like that. Because generally, people figure these out pretty quickly, and I think this one will be one of the simpler ones to actually route, simply because there aren't as many ramps and strange shortcuts you can go on. And this concludes our fourth variant of Auckland. Now, there is actually a fifth variant that you can drive inside this season. It is called Straights and Hairpins, and it is the final race in this Heatwave career season. Unfortunately, it needs 17 flags to get to, and you can actually only get 16 up to this point right now, because you need the V12 Speedster to get up to 17 flags. Kind of a bummer, but I'm sure we'll be able to drive on more of these tracks in multiplayer, so I'm not too worried about it. So guys, I hope you enjoyed my first impressions about the track, and be sure to let me know down in the comments below what you think about it. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like the video if you have enjoyed, and consider subscribing for more Asphalt and other games content, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye!